1 minute smarter, every market clearer. Welcome to my channel, I'm Claire. Today, we're going to discuss a topic that might come as a surprise, and perhaps even a shock to those who hold a beautiful vision of the land of the maple leaf. Today, we are performing a deep structural analysis of Canada, once regarded as a global model for livability and the gold standard of welfare systems. When you take a close look at the Canada of today, you'll discover it is in the midst of a survival crisis capable of shaking its very foundations. An economist once offered an incredibly biting yet sharp assessment, describing modern-day Canada as a failing five-star hotel. I find this metaphor fascinating. While the interior facilities are dilapidated and the service system has nearly collapsed, the hotel continues to charge outrageously high room rates based on a five-star reputation earned 30 years ago, simply coasting along day by day. Reality is often crueler than any script. In many people's minds, Canada is that low-profile, prosperous northern neighbor forever trailing behind the United States. However, data shows that for this former middle-class paradise, the economic pillar is no longer technology or industry, but a massive real estate casino. Even more shocking is that a UN special rapporteur used terms as severe as a breeding ground for modern slavery to describe Canada's current temporary foreign worker program. To understand the essence of this crisis, we must start with the cold, hard numbers. Over the past decade, the world entered an era of explosive growth in AI, biotech, and semiconductors. Fueled by Silicon Valley, American productivity has soared. Interestingly, data shows that during the same period, Canada was busy building houses. This isn't just a figure of speech, it's a brutal fact reflected in macroeconomic data. In economics, a nation's prosperity depends on its total factor productivity. Simply put, how much value you can create with the same amount of labor and capital. The latest statistics show that the average productivity of a Canadian worker is now a full 30% lower than that of their American counterpart. How did this happen? Did Canadians simply become lazy? I've found that's not the case. The root of the problem lies in a severe systemic bias in the country's capital flow. Let's look at the choice facing a Canadian multimillionaire. If you have significant capital, the first path is to invest in a startup developing autonomous driving algorithms or new types of batteries. But this path is risky, involving complex regulations, high taxes, and long R&D cycles. The second path. You simply buy 5 condos in Toronto or Vancouver and watch them automatically appreciate by 10% to 20% every year. Under this distorted incentive structure, nearly all of Canada's capital over the last 20 years has been locked into land speculation. In the US, real estate accounts for about 20% of total capital investment, which is seen as a healthy balance. In Canada, that figure is close to 40%. This means while the US is investing in AI, chips, and automated machinery, Canadian capital is circulating in a relay game of reinforced concrete. This practice generates no actual wealth growth. The direct result is that Canadian companies have stopped updating equipment and developing software because all the money is being lent to banks to pay mortgages. As experts put it, we are witnessing the deindustrialization of an industrialized nation. Beyond the acute myocardial infarction of real estate, another tumor in the Canadian economy is state-protected oligopolies. If you live in Canada, you likely share the painful feeling of being exploited. I find this point quite compelling. Canadians pay some of the highest telecommunications bills in the world. In Australia or Finland, an unlimited data plan might cost just a few dollars, but in Canada, the big three, Rogers, Bell, and TELUS, control the market. Because laws prohibit foreign competitors from entering, mobile data prices in Canada are roughly 7 times higher than in Australia. This so-called protection of national industry policy has actually become a fig leaf for plundering the middle class. This monopoly isn't limited to telecoms. It extends to the grocery industry, where a handful of companies control nearly 80% of the market. While you struggle with inflationary pressures, these supermarket giants are posting historic profit records. This high cost of living caused by a lack of competition is, in effect, a hidden tax levied on ordinary citizens. This environment leads directly to a serious brain drain. If you are a top-tier tech talent facing high taxes, astronomical rent, and expensive groceries, while the US next door offers higher salaries and a lower cost of living, why would you stay? Thus, a vicious cycle forms. Second-rate talent flows to the US. Third-rate capital flows into real estate, and ordinary citizens are repeatedly harvested by oligopolies. If the productivity crisis is a chronic illness, then the real estate bubble is Canada's fatal wound. Today, Toronto and Vancouver are no longer homes for local young people. They have become ATMs for global illicit industries and capital flight. This involves a professional and terrifying term: snow washing. Snow washing refers to Canada's extremely lax laws regarding corporate ownership registration, laxer even than some offshore tax havens, which allow criminals and corrupt officials to easily purchase luxury homes through anonymous shell companies. This tainted black money, once cycled through Canadian real estate, becomes as pure and white as the snow. According to government-commissioned reports, tens of billions of Canadian dollars in black market funds flow into Canadian real estate every year. This creates an absurd phenomenon. A doctor or software engineer working hard in Toronto isn't just competing with their neighbor to buy a house. They are actually competing with global money laundering syndicates, transnational drug lords, and overseas elites seeking capital flight. In this unfair game, housing prices in Toronto and Vancouver have completely detached from resident incomes. To buy an average home in Vancouver, a household needs an annual income of 360,000 CAD, yet the median household income in Canada is only around 70,000 CAD. This means that for the vast majority of this generation and the next, the dream of homeownership has been completely shattered. Even more dangerous is Canada's mortgage structure. Let's look at how it differs from the US. Americans generally have 30-year fixed-rate mortgages, while Canadians mostly use 5-year fixed or variable rates. This means when interest rates spike, thousands of homeowners find that their monthly payments don't even cover the interest, and debt snowballs out of control. When a nation's pillar industry is built on money laundering and high-leverage debt, the foundation of that nation has begun to rot. To mask the GDP stagnation caused by the collapse of productivity, the federal government adopted the simplest, crudest, and most controversial method: large-scale population growth. Since 2016, Canada has accepted nearly 3 million new immigrants, the equivalent of stuffing the population of a medium-sized country into its borders in a short time. Interestingly, data shows that while total GDP appears to grow, because infrastructure like hospitals, roads, schools, and housing hasn't kept pace, it has led to severe capital dilution. Simply put, if you have 10 workers and 1 machine, productivity is high. But if you bring in 20 workers and still only have that 1 machine, per capita output drops. Now, the rapidly growing population has thinned out existing infrastructure, leading to a continuous decline in the real standard of living for Canadians. Under this aggressive immigration policy, some appalling black holes have emerged, such as the diploma mills or private career colleges popping up everywhere. These schools are essentially visa printing factories that charge international students high tuition fees with the promise of a path to immigration. But when these students arrive full of hope, they find unaffordable rent and gig work as food delivery drivers or factory workers. This behavior not only exploits the dreams of new immigrants, but also suppresses wages for low-level workers and drives up rents in poor communities. This is why the UN criticized the system for becoming a breeding ground for modern slavery. Economic decline inevitably leads to social unrest. Canada is currently facing an unprecedented psychological shock as the younger generation realizes they will forever be poorer than their parents. Among those aged 20 to 29, there are about 250,000 more men than women. These young people, without stable career prospects, unable to buy homes or start families, are often the tinder for social instability. In response to these issues, the federal government has continued to borrow, with future deficits expected to reach a staggering 70 billion to 90 billion CAD. I've noticed many economists are beginning to worry that Canada is Argentinizing, sliding from a developed nation into a state of long-term decline and political instability. At the same time, the Canadian federal system faces collapse due to intensifying internal centrifugal forces. Friction is deepening between the federal government and Alberta, with its oil resources, and Quebec, with its unique culture. Alberta believes it heavily subsidized inefficient provinces like Quebec through transfer payments during economic booms, only to be suppressed by the federal government in the name of environmentalism when facing energy development challenges. Once the social contract breaks, the flames of separatism will reignite. If it loses Alberta's energy or Quebec's territory, this country will no longer be Canada. External pressures make Canada's situation even more difficult. Let's look closely at its southern neighbor. The U.S. no longer views Canada as a close ally, but, according to the Trump corollary, sees it as a resource warehouse with uncontrolled borders and hollowed-out sovereignty. When 75% of a country's exports depend on a single customer, and that customer begins threatening to close the door and impose tariff pressures, Canada is effectively in a hostage situation. What does the U.S. really want? It doesn't want Canada's broken healthcare system or its inflated real estate. It wants Canada's assets, critical minerals. In the 21st century, lithium, cobalt, graphite, and rare earths are the new oil, the lifeblood of electric vehicles, missiles, and semiconductors. Canada has some of the world's largest reserves of critical minerals, and Washington's goal is clear: ensure the supply chains for these minerals are fully integrated into the U.S. industrial base. Ottawa has now received an ultimatum: either cooperate with U.S. decisions like a province would, or face the risk of effectively losing sovereignty. The idea of becoming the 51st state is no longer just a joke, it is a serious political logic. So, is there any hope for Canada? I believe that although the medicine is bitter, the answer is yes. To reverse the slide toward disintegration, Canada must complete 3 nearly impossible strategic transformations. First, it must release its energy potential. Canada should stop suppressing the natural gas industry due to ideological debates. Today, as Asia and Europe desperately need stable energy, rapidly advancing LNG exports is the only lever Canada has to quickly generate massive foreign exchange, repay debt, and support its welfare system. Second, it must break the internal oligopolies. Reducing the cost of living cannot rely on government subsidies, which only drive up inflation. The real solution is to introduce competition by opening the market to U.S. and European telecom and supermarket giants. Only by bringing prices down can the middle class have room to breathe and talent be retained. Third, and most difficult, is signing a treaty of submission. Canada needs to acknowledge its weak position and proactively propose a deal to the U.S. In exchange for guaranteeing America's priority access and absolute security regarding critical minerals, the U.S. would remove all tariffs and build high-tech processing plants within Canada, rather than treating it merely as a raw material extraction site. This is an extreme trade-off of sovereignty for survival, but compared to gradual decay and eventual disintegration, it may be the only path for Canada to maintain its status as an independent political entity. Canada serves as a heavy warning to the world. If a country becomes obsessed with real estate speculation and ignores technological innovation, its prosperity is a castle built on sand. If it relies on mass immigration to cover up structural flaws, it falls into a dual trap of population and resources. Once, people immigrated to Canada in pursuit of a better life. Now, many young Canadians are wondering how to leave. In these turbulent times, maintaining clear insight is our only safeguard. Thanks for listening to this deep analysis. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to stay tuned. I always appreciate your feedback, so drop a comment below. Thanks for listening, and catch you later.